Blue Jays fans, to episode 1, the debut episode of Jays Banter. It's a new podcast brought to you by @BlueJaysWave on Instagram. Today, me and my co-host Mo will talk about everything Blue Jays. We'll talk about the past, present, and future tense of the Blue Jays, and we'll have a lot of fun doing it. For those of you who don't know, my name is Robert Pantelimon. I'm the founder of Blue Jays Way, formerly known as Blue Jay Center. Account started in 2014 in October and still running today. And joined today, as I mentioned, my co-host Mo. How are you?
Doing good, Robert. How are you today?
Not bad. Blue Jays played a game last night and they won the game. Quite an exciting performance. Vlad Jr. With the big home run late, and as we're recording this, Jays are ready to take the field against the Yankees, looking for the series sweep of the Yankees. So certainly nice little run here by the Jays.
Yeah, for sure, especially with wins not coming by easily in this season. It's really nice to see some wins, and they're not going to come often, so we got to enjoy them. And speaking of today, the Dome is open, so that's really nice. And hopefully the Jays can pull off the sweep against the Yankees, but Edwin Jackson is pitching tonight, so it may be a tough go.
Yeah. Last game in Colorado, quite the tough watch for those of you who watched. Not sure how many. I believe the Raptors were playing that night, so maybe that sort of canceled out a little viewers, but certainly not a guy you feel good against. Good for, like, if you're trying to go for the sweep. But we'll see how it goes. But we'll probably give some game updates. By the time you'll be listening to this, it'll be long past this game, so you'll know what happens. But let's talk about sort of what's gone on so far, considering this is our opening podcast, our first episode. So let's give a bit of a background story on what's gone on so far this year, and hasn't been all that pretty, right?
For sure. Coming into the season, we had some expectations with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. coming up. We had Bo Bichette coming up. But as the season progressed on, we started to think that, oh man, this team isn't very good, and like refreshing the mock drafts for next year, that's the point we're at right now. Just kind of rebuilding. It's been a pretty long rebuild. Fans are getting mad at Shapkins, the regime, but you know what? You got to take it as it is, and hopefully this plan that they have will set us up for a long time in the future.
Yeah, right now we sort of talked about this a little bit off air before the recording of this. We're just looking at the Blue Jays stats for this season, and Eric Sogard, a guy who was signed on a minor league deal, not a guy who made the big league roster, a guy who really wasn't supposed to get any sort of significant playing time. He's currently second on the team in OPS, right behind Justin Smoke, and we're over 2 months into the year. So just by that sample, that should pretty much tell you how this season's gone so far. But despite all the negatives, there have been some positives, and obviously you mentioned the story of the season, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. coming up, and he's really sort of coming along here the last few weeks or so. Really ever since the second week of May has sort of caught fire and hitting balls hard with regularity, climbing up the home run leaderboards, and he's a guy that can sort of save the fan perspective of the year, an exciting young prospect to watch, though.
For sure, and I've noticed that early on in the season, we had a lot of hype around him. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. just tearing it up, absolutely tearing it up in the minor leagues. But he came up for the Jays. Fans had high hopes. He didn't start off too great. He had a really good first series against, I believe it was the Padres? No.
Athletics.
The Athletics, yes. And he had a slow go, end of April. But then I've recently noticed he's turned it on. Pitchers started pitching to him. And I think that went with him moving up in the batting order. Charlie Montoya put him 5th, and I personally didn't feel like that was a good spot for him to be in. I feel like having some protection in front of Smoke, Grichuk, pitchers would more likely be pitching to Guerrero. And I've also noticed that he's kind of switched up his stance, putting his front foot closer to the front plate. And he's been putting in results for the past week, and he's really been tearing the cover off the ball. And yesterday night was a really good pitch by Zach Britton, but it was almost as if it was like a better swing by Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I mentioned about people not so much watching. They missed quite a bit of a swing yesterday by Vlad, and a comeback against really a Yankees bullpen that many consider to be among the elite bullpens in the league. I mean, you always hear about how if you're in the 6th inning and you don't have a lead against the Yankees, you can pretty much pack up and hope to come out stronger the next day. But it was good to see the Blue Jays. They ended up scoring 7 unanswered runs. And another positive, sort of lead into, I guess, the short list of positives. The guy who closed out the game last night and the night before, Ken Giles, he now has an ERA of 1.08. He has not allowed a run in 17 2/3 innings. April 16th against the Twins was the last time he's allowed an earned run. So you're talking about among elite closers in baseball. I mean, how much longer until you can really put Ken Giles on that list? He's been absolute dynamite this year.
No doubt about it, and I feel like Ken Giles will be the only Jay representing the Blue Jays at the All-Star game, personally. And I feel like he's been really dialed in ever since he got traded from the Astros. He had the whole incident with the Astros, and he was sent down to AAA, but then we traded him for Osuna, which at the time felt like a really bad trade. But now looking back at it, it's like Ken Giles is a really elite closer in the game right now, and maybe even top 5 this season.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Like when they made the trade, obviously you weren't going to get a fair bargain deal or a fair value deal, I should say, for Roberto Osuna, who had undergone legal issues, and a closer like that who was on pace to become one of the best closers in MLB history, considering he started off at such a young age and pitching at such a high level. And a guy who held the heart of the fans. He was a part of those playoff teams, and a lot of people really liked his potential. And unfortunately, it happened. The incident happened, and the return that the Blue Jays were going to get was never going to be of equal value. But Ken Giles, I think he's really not making anyone shed any tears at this point in time. And we're going to stay on the pitching, which bullpen sort of been up and down all year. But I think the more interesting part of the Blue Jays pitching is their starting pitching, because we've seen the good, we've seen the ugly, but the common denominator is that Marcus Stroman has been excellent this season. And you mentioned Ken Giles will be the only guy who will represent the Blue Jays in the All-Star game. I'm thinking Marcus Stroman should be there as well. You're just looking at his stats, and from a wins-losses standpoint, not great, 3-7, but obviously in this era of baseball, we know that means very little. But his 2.84 ERA on the surface looks great, and his WAR, wins above replacement, 1.9, that currently leads the team. So I think he's a guy who should be in the All-Star game, and I think that's sort of the interesting storyline as we head to July. Will Marcus Stroman be a Blue Jay on August 1st?
Yeah, for sure. Marcus Stroman, after some would say a pretty bad season, maybe an underperforming season from last year, he's been dialed in this year. He's had a few rough starts. He started the year really well, and he's had a few well starts. But as you said, I wouldn't be surprised if he made the All-Star team. But I feel like Ken Giles has a better case, and with all the competition in the major leagues right now, I feel like it would be, and with all the good pitchers in the American League, I feel like it would be tough for Marcus Stroman to get to the All-Star game. Speaking of Marcus Stroman, his strikeouts numbers have been pretty low this season, and his walks have been inflated quite a bit. And batters are still hitting like .251 against him, and he also has a whip of 1.3. So I feel like even with the numbers he has with a 2.84 ERA, he still has some flaws, and I think that's what you get with a ground ball pitcher, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always said about Marcus Stroman, when comparing Stroman and Sanchez, I always said that while Stroman might be the more consistent pitcher, I always thought that Sanchez always had the higher upside because, as you mentioned, the strikeout numbers have never quite been there for Stroman. He's sort of been a guy who pitches to contact, gets ground balls, and been very effective that way, no doubt about it. But in terms of ace stuff, I thought Sanchez was probably the guy that had the potential to be the ace of the staff, but so far this year, Marcus Stroman has been the better pitcher, and I kind of want to sort of revert this back to Sanchez. He's another guy who many believe will join Stroman in terms of being traded at the deadline, and so far this season, he's been just like a lot of the Blue Jays have been, very inconsistent. We've seen him be very good at times, we've seen him not be so good at times, and we've seen him come out early with injuries, and ailing fingernail that does never appear to be healthy. Would it be fair to say that he's sort of the most interesting guy on the roster to look at moving forward, considering the fact that he might get traded at the deadline, and if he's even healthy enough to get traded. I feel like every time he comes out the pitch, there's always a new storyline brewing with him.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Whenever he's pitching, you never know what you're going to get with Aaron Sanchez. And he's been having finger issues for quite a while. And that's why, in my opinion, I feel like Aaron Sanchez, if not traded, which we'll leave that for another time closer to the trade deadline. But right now, I'll just say I feel like he should be the one that's getting traded over Marcus Stroman. I feel like he should be transitioned to the bullpen, just with his finger issues and his inconsistency. His stuff plays well in the bullpen, and I feel like he should be in the bullpen. He's not been eating up innings, only pitching 66 innings pitched this year, and batters are hitting up 258 against him this season, and his walks have been inflated. And that's one issue with Aaron Sanchez is his command. Even when he's on, his command doesn't look too sharp. So I feel like putting him in a bullpen role would really benefit him for the rest of his career. I feel like.
I think the main reason why you would pick Stroman over him would, excluding just this season, would be the fact that he is a client of Scott Boras, and for those of you who don't know, Scott Boras is the sort of the super agent in Major League Baseball. He's not a guy who likes his clients to sign extensions. He'd prefer them to go to free agency and cash out, and unfortunately, the Blue Jays don't exactly have the best history with Boras, which would probably lead you to think that he would, I guess, try to suggest other offers elsewhere and stay away from Toronto moving forward. So that's probably why you would want to stay away from Sanchez, in terms of re-signing him, because it's a lot harder to get him to sign terms under Boras. And Marcus Stroman, I feel like if you're going to keep one of them, he's the guy to keep just for that matter. That an extension for Sanchez is kind of a moot point, really.
Yeah, especially with the super agent Scott Boras. Many fans on Twitter have been expressing their opinions so far this season, and whenever a question of Marcus Stroman versus Aaron Sanchez, they're always pretty much leaning towards Marcus Stroman as the one staying in Toronto, and the main reasons why is because Scott Boras. And yeah, Scott Boras, like you said, is probably going to try to lure away Aaron Sanchez from the team just so he can get into free agency. And personally, I don't think the Blue Jays can outbid any other team for a high-demand pitcher like Aaron Sanchez. And that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, and we'll stay with the rotation. Another interesting guy that really was not supposed to factor in, I don't think, as much as he has so far, but Trent Thornton made his 13th start of the year last night. Overall, the numbers, ERA 4.73, that's obviously not great, but I feel that considering he was a guy who the Blue Jays pretty much got for Aledmys Diaz in the offseason, was not really supposed to be a guy who was depended on, but he's been pretty good in terms of giving the Blue Jays depth and length in the rotation. He might be a guy that the Blue Jays might want to keep in past 2019, and considering that there's really not many guys on the roster who you can say that for, I think that makes him pretty interesting in itself. How would you grade Trent Thornton's performance this year, and do you think that he could be a potential cornerstone for this team moving forward?
I definitely feel like Trent Thornton has been a pleasant surprise to the Blue Jays roster this season. To think that we traded Aledmys Diaz for him, who is struggling in Houston, I feel like it was a great trade for both teams at that time, but I feel like the Blue Jays have won this trade by a landslide, only because Trent Thornton is very young. I believe he is 26 years old, and his stuff is really, really sharp. As you can see, his curveball really plays well, and he has a nice, funky delivery, which makes his fastball appear more effective. And I do believe that he will be a cornerstone. He can be like a 4th to 5th starter for the Blue Jays. And he's shown flashes this year. I believe that one game in Texas where he shut them out in 8 innings. And he's shown resilience as a young kid. He doesn't really get knocked around as opposed to like a Sean Reed Foley would.
Yeah, and just more of a recent example. You look at the game last night, and this is last night, June the 6th, we're recording this podcast, so June the 5th against the Yankees. His overall line, not so impressive. 5 innings, only 5 hits, 4 earned runs, 3 walks. So if you just look at the stat line, you'd say that he had a pretty pedestrian game, but I'm telling you, I watched the first 4 innings of last night's game, and through the first 11 batters, he got them all out. didn't give up a